السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ثم ما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, welcome back to another session in our ongoing series on the forgotten companions of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Today, inshallah, we're going to begin discussing the story of a new companion whose name was Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi. Now, Saeed radiallahu anh, like so many of the other companions we've discussed, is not exactly a household name, but he is a name that we should be aware of, and his story does offer us valuable lessons that are worth internalizing. So, who was Sa'id radiallahu anh? We don't know too much about his background, so we're going to begin his story relatively late in the seerah. We're going to begin his story after the Battle of Badr. Now, Sa'id radiallahu anh at this time was still a had not yet entered Islam. After the Battle of Badr, he was invited, along with many others, to the public execution of one of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this companion had been captured, and in revenge to the losses that occurred at the Battle of Badr, the Quraysh decided to execute him publicly. And this companion's name was Khubayb ibn Adi. Now, Khubayb radiallahu anh was taken and hung on a wooden cross in front of Khubayb radiallahu anh. And he was actually on the front row. He was in the front rows, so he had a close-up view of what happened. Now, Khubayb radiallahu anh, before he was executed, he asked the Quraysh if he would be permitted to pray 2 rak'at, and they allowed this. And so he prayed those 2 rak'at. And when he was done, he asked the Quraysh, he told them, if you think that I was praying this rak'at because I'm afraid of my death, then I would not have bothered at all. So basically he was telling them, I'm not afraid of what you're about to do to me. And the Quraysh proceeded. They hung him up and they began to dismember him. It was a very, very brutal way to go. They began to cut up his body. And as they began to do this, and as the blood began to flow, they asked Khubayb, and they were taunting him. They asked him tauntingly, do you wish that Muhammad was in your place? And Khubayb radiallahu anh, he remained defiant, and he said, I would not wish to be safe and secure with my family if it meant even a thorn, even a single thorn, pricking the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. Now, of course, the Quraysh were not pleased with this answer, neither was the crowd, who at this point, they began shouting, kill him, kill him. There was bloodlust in the air. And the Quraysh proceeded to dismember the rest of Khubayb's body until, of course, he died. It was an extremely gruesome execution. And the entire scene, with the crowd shouting and screaming to kill him, and the Quraysh dismembering his body, and Khubayb radiallahu anh, before he died, he raised his arms and he prayed. He said, "Oh my Lord, destroy every single one of them. Do not let any of them escape." He was praying for the destruction of the Quraysh, for the destruction of his executioners. All of this together, all of these details combined to create a very visceral and disturbing memory for Sa'id radiallahu anh. After Khubayb was killed and executed and his body was cut into pieces, after all that was done, everyone moved on with their life, right? A few days later, and everyone had forgot about it. It was as if it never happened. But the event really stuck in the memory of Sa'id radiallahu anh. He simply could not get it out of his head. Even when he slept, he would dream of Khubayb radiallahu anh. He would see him in his dream praying before the wooden cross, and then he would see him hung on it, and then he would see him praying for the destruction of the Quraysh, and at times he would be seized with this fear, this uncontrollable fear that he himself would be among those who are destroyed, that that prayer would be answered, and that he would be destroyed along with all the others who had attended the public execution that day. So so Sa'id al he could not forget Khubayb al, and he could not forget not just how gruesome his death was, but how calm and steadfast in his faith he was, even in the face of this brutality. And so that's what eventually compelled Sa'id to actually get on his horse and ride out to Medina. He eventually decided that he was going to go and see the Prophet ﷺ himself. And so he got on his horse and off he went. And he went and he actually met the Prophet in person, and eventually he entered Islam. And it all began with that day when he attended the execution of Khubayb Radwan as a young man. Now Sa'id Radwan, he became part of the Muslims of Medina, and of course he was an active and integral member of the community, and he participated in some of the battles, like the Battle of Khaybar, for example. And after the Prophet passed away, Khubayb Radwan was often sought by Abu Bakr Radwan and Umar ibn Khattab Radwan for his advice. He established himself fairly quickly as a thoughtful and wise man whose counsel was extremely valuable and was sought after. And so he advised Abu Bakr and he advised Umar ibn Khattab. And in fact, shortly after Umar became the Khalifa, he actually went to him and he gave him a few pieces of advice. He told him something very poignant. He told him, do not he told him, fear God in your dealings with people. Fear God in your dealings with people. But do not fear the people in your relationship with God. So when you are dealing with the affairs of the ummah, when you're dealing with the affairs of people and ensuring the rights of people, fear Allah. Remember that He will hold you accountable for what you do. So remember to stay on the path of justice. But when it comes to your relationship with Allah, do not fear what other people say. Do not worry about what other people say. Right? That's focus. So focus on doing right by Allah, regardless of what the people around you think. So fear God in your relationship with people, but do not fear the people in your relationship with God. A beautiful and concise formulation, which is just one example of the wisdom of Sa'id radiallahu anh. And of course, he also advised Omar radiallahu anh in other matters as well. And Omar radiallahu anh eventually decided that he was going to actually appoint Sa'id radiallahu anh as a governor. He wanted to be the governor of one of the major cities in Syria, of modern day Syria. He wanted him to be, he wanted to oversee one of the major trading cities in Syria. And this was a very important position. This was a very important place. This vast, bustling city of immense strategic and economic value. So, who do you want running that place? You want someone trustworthy, wise, and capable. This is not a position for anyone. So Omar Radiallahu decided that it was Saeed Radiallahu who would be most qualified for that position. Now Saeed Radiallahu actually did not greet the news of his appointment with joy. In fact, he was extremely dismayed. He actually rejected it at first. He told Omar, when Omar told him that he wanted to appoint him to the governorship, he told him, please no, please do not expose me to this fitna. Do not expose me to the temptation of these worldly affairs. I don't want. So basically, Said said, I don't want to get involved with politics. I don't want to get involved with ruling anyone or governing anyone. I don't want to do. I don't want to deal with any of that because, of course, he recognized how easily that sort of political power can corrupt you and corrupt you absolutely. But Omar would not back down. He said, I'm not going to let you refuse me. I'm not taking no for an answer. Are you going to put the responsibility of the Khilafah entirely on me and forsake me? Withdraw? Not help me? And so Omar, when he made this plea, Sa'id was moved and he decided, he said, no, I will not forsake you. And so he accepted the governorship. And shortly after, he and his uh, bride, and they had been recently married, they set out to Syria, where Sa'id would begin his governorship of this major city. And that's what we'll discuss next time, inshallah. جزاك الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.